Whenever I post about my goats online, pictures or videos or anything like that, there are a few questions that tend to come up, and they tend to be the same questions pretty much every time. So I thought I'd take a few minutes today to make a video answering some of the most frequently asked questions. The first question that tends to come up is, what kind of goats are they? And the specific breeds is they're mutts. They're a cross between French Alpine and Swiss Toggenburg, which are both dairy breeds from the European Alps, the like central western European region. Those are very common. That's a very common breed for packing goats. So the next question that often comes up, kind of along with that, is, where did I get them? And the answer is that I have a friend who lives probably 20 miles from here who raises dairy goats. She milks them, and when you raise dairy goats, the males are pretty much expendable. You can't milk a male goat. So they sell those usually for a pretty reasonable price. And so a goat like Victor here, he cost me about $100. 100, 150 tends to be the price for a good pedigree dairy goat. So the next two questions, which are kind of connected, are, how did you train them, and do they need a leash? And the answer is no, they don't really need a leash. They follow pretty well without one, and that's because of their training. But their training is really just, I raised them up from little babies, bottle fed them as infants, and so they think of me as their mother and a member of their herd. And because of that, they'll follow me pretty much anywhere. The last thing that they want to do when they're out in the wilderness is get separated from their herd. So they don't go running off, really. When we stop in one spot for a while, they kind of do wander around. They want to look for better food to eat. They like to go visiting if there are other campers in the vicinity. So in those situations, I generally put up a high line and attach them to that so that they can't wander off as much. But when we're on the trail, they follow pretty well. Coconut can sometimes follow other people, which is kind of embarrassing. He'll just follow whichever group of humans catches his fancy at the moment. So when we pass other groups on the trail, he can get confused by that. Next question, how much land do you need? I keep my goats here at my parents' ranch, which has 15 acres, and that's usually split up between the 2 goats and the 20 or so sheep that we have. You can get away with less land than that. The county ordinances here state that to keep ruminant animals, which for some reason they include horses in that, but I don't know, herbivore animals, you need at least 1 acre to have any of them at all. I think if you have 1 acre, they let you keep up to 5, and if you want to go over 5, then you need an additional, I want to say 10,000 square feet per animal after that. 1 acre of pasture is probably enough to keep a goat. You will probably have to give them supplemental feed if you only keep them on 1 acre. Another question that's related to that is, can they come in the house? And the answer is no, they cannot come in the house. When Victor was very little, we tried keeping him in the house sometimes. It did not work out at all. Goats don't really have the instinct to eliminate waste in a designated area or an area that is not their primary habitation. Like dogs and cats, I think they have that kind of idea of a den. That's my hypothesis, that they know not to eliminate waste in their den. Goats don't have that. They eliminate waste wherever they happen to be at the moment, and so you don't have that instinct to play off of. So I suspect it would be very difficult to housebreak a goat. Additionally, they will try and eat absolutely anything. I mean, they'll try and eat your shoelaces, they'll try and eat your notebooks, they'll try and eat the curtains off of your windows and the pictures off of your walls. I mean, there's no way that you could really keep a goat inside, just because they will try to eat anything. And even if they discover that it's not something that they like the taste of, that's cold comfort after they've completely pulled the curtain rod off of the wall. So you can't keep a goat in the house as a pet. They need a pasture and they need a large area. I say that you can keep one goat on an acre, but you should really never have just one goat. You should always have at least two. So we have Victor and Coconut, and they provide some level of companionship. Goats are gregarious animals, and they'll suffer really bad psychologically if they don't have other animals around that they can interact with pretty much constantly. You know, maybe if you have a dog that they can spend all their time with and they get along very well, that might fill that need, but really multiple goats is the best way to go if you're going to have any. The big question that everybody wants to know is, how much do they carry? And the answer is that right now, Victor and Coconut are pretty young. They are just turning 2 years old next month. They're starting their 3rd year. But because they're still young, they can only carry about 10% of their body weight, which we weighed Victor the other day. He weighs about 140 pounds, so 10% of his body weight would be about 14 pounds. When they're fully grown, they'll be larger. Fully grown dairy goat like this can weigh upwards of 150, 200 pounds, and they can carry about 25% of their body weight at that point. So he could possibly carry 45, even 50 pounds when he's fully grown. But for the moment, they can't carry that much. Another thing that a lot of people bring up that is, I can understand it, but it is a little bit odd to me, is predators. They want to know, what do you do about predators? And the answer is, I don't do anything about predators. I don't really worry about predators. If we look at what kind of predators we have in my area, it's pretty much black bears, Ursus americanus, coyotes, and mountain lions. And of those three, the kind that you encounter most frequently in the backcountry are black bears. I've run into black bears more times than I can count. I have chased black bears out of my camp more times than I can count. There's never been a human killed by a black bear a wild black bear in California. The last time a human was killed by any sort of bear in California was in 1896, and that was a grizzly bear. Grizzlies went extinct in 1921. That's the last time anybody ever saw one in California. So black bears are not near as aggressive as grizzly bears, and in my, as I say, pretty extensive experience, they're just after the easiest meal that they can find out there. So if they can't get into your bear canister, they pretty much just trundle off. Not to say that they wouldn't go after a goat under any circumstances, but I think as long as there's other food sources that are in evidence, they'll probably try their luck with those first. The second one is coyotes. Coyotes are not very big animals. You know, I've encountered quite a few of those. They kill our sheep on occasion, but they're pretty much always killing lambs, maybe an old ewe. They don't go after the rams. And the Barbados rams that we keep aren't even as big as Victor is here. In terms of a 140-pound goat versus a 40, 50-pound coyote, my money's on the goat. Mountain lions pose a substantial threat, obviously. They hunt bighorn sheep and deer in the wild pretty regularly, and a bighorn sheep is a much more formidable opponent than a domesticated goat. That said, mountain lions tend to be very, very shy of humans. And since I'll be with this guy at all times when we're out on the trail, I'm sort of operating on the hypothesis that my presence will keep mountain lions skittish and at bay and keep the goats safe. I don't know for 100% that that's the case, but that's my operating hypothesis. And frankly, if I'm wrong, there's not really anything I can do about it anyway. I can't bring a full enclosure out there to keep mountain lions away from the goats. So really I just have to hope, and that's good enough for me. One aspect of the predator question that occurs to me whenever people ask is that people take their dogs out into the wilderness all the time. People take their kids. Women go hiking in the wilderness, sometimes very petite women, and petite men for that matter. My girlfriend weighs substantially less than Victor does, and he's a lot stronger than her. Nobody worries about mountain lions coming after their golden retriever, or coyotes stalking their children when they're out on the trail, despite the fact that in terms of absolute size and ability to defend yourself, Victor is probably a lot more robust than either a human child or a golden retriever. So I don't really worry about predators that much. The last, not really question that I get, but it's sort of an assumption that people make, is when they see my goats and one of them has horns and a beard and the other one doesn't, they say, oh, and what's the girl's name? But in fact, Coconut is also male. They're both male. They're both castrated males, which in goats and sheep are called wethers. Both male and female goats grow horns, unlike sheep where it's usually only the males. At least with these breeds, the males and females both grow horns, and as do the castrated males. So the reason that Coconut doesn't have horns is because the area around the horns on his scalp were cauterized in infancy, and that's a very common practice with goat breeders. People who show goats at fairs and such, they aren't allowed to have horns. So this is really common. I have mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, Coconut, despite not having any horns, still likes to run into things head first, and so he's got a big old bald patch and some scabs and calluses on his head from running into things without the protection of those horns. On the other hand, Victor, who has horns, is quite a bit more aggressive because he has that tool at his disposal to impose his will upon those around him, which isn't necessarily great. So that's why there's a difference in horns. Now for the beard, again, both male and female goats can grow beards, and the difference is genetic. So some female goats grow beards, some don't. Some castrated males grow beards, some don't. Most intact male goats do grow beards, and they tend to be kind of more bushy, kind of Henry David Thoreau type things going on, whereas female or castrated male will tend to grow just a little wispy beard, and some, like Coconut, don't grow beards at all. So apparently Victor got whatever genes promote beard growth, and Coconut did not. So those are all the questions that people tend to ask whenever I post pictures or videos of my goats online. And if you have any others, don't hesitate to ask in the comments or send me a message by some other method. I'll be happy to answer to the best of my ability. That's all for today. Happy trails.